for many victims of domestic violence, and there is a very little proof that if there is any effect on the victims. There are some hesitant signs that individuals who give declarations and cherish them. Um, so assess what about the impact is last? Well, the IPCC reports note that the preliminary risk assessment of this call operators mistake the inefficiencies in recovering the court. Hello, and welcome to the True Crime Lounge podcast. I know it's been a minute since we did an episode, and I do apologize that I've been really busy with school, work, and life in general. I recently lost my grandma a few weeks ago. I'm getting over a cold, and I've been focusing on my other podcast as well, so I do apologize. So I'm excited for this episode to come out. But I'm also so excited too that we are 72 subscribers. We just need 28 more. I think my math might be off, but we're so close to 100 subscribers. And guys, please subscribe. Help a girl out. But for any updates on my channel or podcast, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. With that being said, let's dive into today's episode. Today we're going to be talking about Clare's Law, in this case, inspired law change. So, first we have to know what is Clare's Law, who inspired this law change, and why is it important? Well, Claire Wood was a woman who was murdered by her abusive ex-boyfriend, George Appleton. And Clare's Law is aka the domestic violence disclosure scheme grants a girl the personal girl a person grants a person the opportunity to find out if their partner has a history of domestic violence. And Appleton did serve time for his domestic violence. However, there was no I Wood had no idea that this was hidden from the public. So countries like UK, Australia, and Canada have all adopted Clare's Law. Now, a tragedy in failing for Claire, who had made several complaints to the police her death before her death in Salford in 2009. And I think it's just really sad. Like the victims come forward and nothing ever gets done. That's just sad right there, and there needs to be more done. But sadly, even with the law change and everything else, this country is still going to say still isn't some people are still just going to take their time with these kind of cases. And it's just sad. But Clare's Law was given its name from the murder of Claire Wood, who lived in Stalford, who tragically was murdered and was set on fire at her house in the hands of her former boyfriend in February 2009. Throughout her relationship, she had made many reports about George Appleton and the police leading up to her murder. Now, these complaints included sexual assaults, criminal damage, threats to kill, and harassment. And due to these reports, Appleton was able to enter Claire's house and murder her. And during the investigation, the family of Claire Wood learned of the criminal history of Appleton, which included violence to women in the forms of threats, harassment, and kidnapping of a previous partner. Now, Claire's family also found that Appleton was previously jailed for 6 months for breaching a restraining order, and again in 2003 for 3 years for harassment toward a woman. Now, Claire's family campaigned for a change in legislation to protect people like Claire. And the campaign was successful and resulted in the creation of Clare's Law. So, what about the murder case? Well, the Independent Police Complaints Commissioner identified systematic shortcomings on behalf of the police leading to her murder in a test case that was conducted in 2010. Appleton had a prior criminal history of criminal violence and harassing former girlfriends on the occasion of Claire's passing. Wood did not know that the nature of his violence was connected to when they first connected on Facebook. In the two parted ways in the fall of 2008, nearly half a year before her murder, and she repeatedly complained about this to a great Manchester about stalking, violence, threats, sexual violence, property destruction committed by her boyfriend. Now, the IPCC assessment also makes it clear that the association has persisted, albeit irregularly. It was issued he was issued a non-harassment notice following the breaking down of Wood's home entrance and a week before she passed away. Wood did not inform the family of the harassment. 1 week following the murder, he attempted suicide. Nevertheless, a sheriff's inquiry into Claire's murder revealed that been criminally killed by strangling. Now, the ACPO, prior to proposal for disclosing this information concerning abuse records was, was engaged in romantic in the right to access to information, the approach that was endorsed by examiner. Now, what about the case? As mentioned earlier, the victim and the offender first connected through Facebook in 2007, and they were together for a year and a half, almost a year and a half. However, he reportedly was verbally and physically abusive to Claire during this time. Due to his repeated infidelity, she abandoned the relationship and physically abandoned the relationship. And his customary, which as in customary during domestic abuse killings, his brutality toward her increased. Now, the imminent risk of Claire by his previous offenses under protection of the Harassment Act 1997, and the conditional discharge of one especially vicious attack on a former partner, was not adequately addressed despite the complaint making at least five contacts with police insinuating common assault, sexual assault, death threats, and attempted rape. At the beginning of 2009, just 14 days after final interaction, he suffocated his former girlfriend, buried her corpse of fire before killing her shortly afterward. Throughout, there were several serious mistakes regarding how the police handled her investigation. Her murder was not correlated explicitly to any of them, and according to the IPCC inquiry, um, and everything. So, what exactly is Clare's Act? Well, this is a domestic violence disclosure scheme, also known as Clare's Act, and this was implemented in Wales and England in 2014 in honor of Clare Wood, whom a boyfriend with a previous record of um, abuse killed as discussed above. Now, it enables police to share typically personal information about an individual's violent record with someone thought to be in danger of harm in the future of empower them to have better security decisions. Now, the DVDS permits authorized voluntarily warn sufferers the assault when they feel doing so would assist in protecting them in further exploration or doing so in reaction of the declaration request made by the victim. With a frequency of revelations made tripling from more than 3,400 to more than 3,400 in 2017 to more than 6,500 in 2019, the DVDS has quickly entrenched itself in the standard as a standard instrument of abuse protection, spousal abuse protection in Wales and England. Now, similar domestic abuse declarations programs are currently in operation in other countries like Northern Ireland, Scotland, and even outside of Britain and New Zealand, and portions of Canada and Australia after being adopted as an example of other countries. Now, the DVDS has received praise for being an excellent example of new victim-centered preemptive strategy for family violence. Police that arms and encourage and safeguards victims rather than penalize. Now, the increase of the use demonstrates how passionately spousal abuse specialists, including the police and law enforcement, have adopted this technique. Now, government intentions to have better integrated DVDS into police safety procedures by putting it in the eagerly awaited domestic violence acts have been applied by organizations that advocate for many victims of domestic violence, and there is a very little proof that if there is any effect on the victims. There are some hesitant signs that individuals who give declarations and cherish them. Um, so assess what about the impact is last? Well, the IPCC reports note that the preliminary risk assessment of this call operators mistake the inefficiencies in recovering the court documents as the Crown Prosecution Service. Their conclusions are not new, but they represent a reiteration of prior IPCC reports and the studies that worry about the poor risk assessment, outdated rules and procedures enforcement, inactivity, and call handling shortcomings. Additionally, a 2014 study called the HM Inspectors of Const- Constabulary, which we're going to go back call HMIC for short, um, concluded that the authorities' response to domestic abuse in the countries like Wales and England was unconscionable and had a variety of adjustments that were required to enhance critical and strategic exercises to guarantee that people were not placed in needless danger. In the context of the Wiz situation, this followed the killing of Katie Boardman, which within the same area, which sparked a substantial public discussion concerning how the judicial framework could safeguard women from repeat domestic abusers. And this discussion also included the question of whether or not these involved in the criminal justice framework must be mandated to reveal past spousal violence and safeguard respective spouses and future victims more effectively. So, following her passing, um, Britain's first spousal abuse exposure program was implemented in response to a community pressure from the fastest responses for spousal abuse. Now, which was championed by Wiz's dad, Michael Brown, and suggestions that the program would be dubbed a PR triumph, which and were very political and very victim focused, presenting crucial consideration um, about how the sufferers' narratives and leverage on a governmental basis to support the enactment of new laws and reforms of legal justice. Now, the establishment of these kinds of legislation had procedure precedence for Britain, and for instance, Sarah's Act was a sexual offenders registration um, that would give families restricted admittance to the registry. Now, this also instituted the wake of the death of an 8-year-old Sarah Payne by a convicted child molester. And I also talked about her case recently. I can't remember if I did or not, but I know I once said I did talk about her, so you can go back and check that episode out if I have talked about it. But anyway, but yes, so by death of anyway, these victims, like Clare's Act and Sarah's Act, reflect a movement over the past 20 years to place individuals at the center of the criminal law structure and raise awareness for the victims' demands. Now, on March 8th, 2014, the occasion of the International Women's Day, there was a countrywide spin on the domestic violence disclosure scheme in the British countries of Wales and England. And at the time, Parliament members Theresa May was Home Secretary. And the DVDS does grant the community the right to inquire the authorities to whether a person has ever been engaged in a spousal abuse or personal relationship assault. So, the petitioner will either be individual A, who is currently in contact with individual B, or individual C, who is a third party submitting a request in the accounts of individual A. Now, significantly, the rule permits to disclose your previously available data is exclusively to legal agencies, and some requirements must be completed before any such knowledge and be sought to be communicated. So, this why to question component for the DVDS complements the establishment to the right to information path, which is attainable to the operating in the legislative field. And this also enables them to start revelations of the alternately private information on the premises of protecting or public security as a consequence of their dangers and security being recognized. This might have happened due to a person committing the offense because of the pertinent knowledge about the person as well. So there are various behaviors that can cause bodily harm, psychologically, cognitive, and sexual damage are also considered domestic harassment or assault. Now, these behaviors could also entail gaining power over a person's financial activities. Following Clare's passing, lawmakers, human rights activists, and community makers said that it was Wood and her father who had been aware of her boyfriend. That if they had been aware of the boyfriend's violent past, they might have been able to save her life. Now, Claire's Act may not resolve any of these problems, but instead, it could make them, it might make them worse. But in this regard, the implementation of a new system comes with an operational load to authorities and everything. So, who can utilize this Claire's Act? Anyone can. So, if you're in the UK, Australia, or Great Britain, Australia, and Canada, you can utilize this. I live in the US, so but I still like finding cases that you actually get to talk about and everything. But that is it for part one of this episode. Join me next time as we talk about part two of Clarewood and the Clares Act. And just remember, if you're in a situation, an abusive relationship, or know someone that is, get help. Don't be afraid to get help. There is someone out there who will help you.